You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Weitz.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. Today's topic is the state of the stock photography industry. Like all aspects of photography, the landscape has changed greatly in a relatively short period of time. Mid-size and larger agencies have been gobbled up by even larger agencies, which in turn are being challenged by smaller micro agencies. And then we have Flickr and royalty-free photo outlets. In a word or two, stock photography ain't what it used to be. In this episode, we're going to talk about what it takes to be a stock photographer. If you're in it, fine. If you're not, what you have to do to get into it, and hopefully how to succeed in it. Joining me today is my producer and co-pilot, John Harris. Our guests are Paul Melcher, who's the owner of Melcher System, a strategic consulting firm for visual tech startups, and the founder of Capture magazine. Paul was named one of the 100 most influential individuals in American photography by American Photo. Also joining us is photographer Rana Faure, who is the former director of photography for Getty Images and is currently the owner and principal photographer for Mother Image, a boutique photo agency specializing in women's lifestyle. Welcome all. Stock has changed, and it's still a big part of the business, but it's changed dramatically. When did stock actually start? When did it become an actual industry?
You know, there's a big debate about who started stock. The usual acceptance is a company like Image Bank is probably the first. It started, I don't have the year. Maybe you know that when it's...
Yeah, just from the older days, it started out with people with literally a suitcase full of images, and they would start selling them. And that was somewhere in the 30s. And then a lot of the photographers got together as a union and started selling their images, but they weren't unionized. They didn't get that far. So Image Bank came in as sort of the first...
That was the first monster agency that I can remember.
That sort of brought it to a level that was professional. And then some other agencies joined in, 4x5, which is now Superstock.
I remember Black Star was out for a long time.
The news agencies came in a little earlier.
And then they all grew and they got real big and everybody was making money and then something happened.
Well, they were very separated at first, and then by the end in categories, and by the end of the 20th century, you had the emergence of companies like Corbis or Getty, who started regrouping news and commercial stock and pretty much everything royalty-free, which was just starting into under one roof, and that kind of already changed the marketplace a lot. At the same time, in the background, the digital age started with digital cameras and the digital workflow, which allowed for the microstock companies like Shutterstock and iStock to emerge.
There's a lot of terms being thrown around. We have microstock, we have boutique agencies, there's a whole bunch of different categorizations of stock agencies. Could somebody give me a little breakdown of what they are and how they differ?
Sure. Shall we start with microstock?
Wherever you want. I'm easy.
So microstock is a model that came out really with the digital age of photography, whereby it's really a crowdsourced photo agency where the company accepts photos from anybody and then license those images on a purely royalty-free format. It's sort of an exchange platform where photographers, anybody can upload photos, and then buyers come in and pay with a credit card, and it's a little bit more organized than a simple eBay or something like that. There's a structure, there's editors that go through the files to make sure that they have a certain degree of quality and size. But otherwise, it's probably the most automated system of commercial stock photography. Boutique, I think you're a better place to talk about boutique.
A boutique agency generally is a small company, and it specializes either in subject matter or how they treat photographers, as opposed to a generalist agencies which have every subject under the sun. And a boutique agency will most likely have a perspective on a certain subject.
So one other thing I should mention about microstock, and I think it's really important, is they're very technology-based companies which have reduced costs to a minimum. So what they do is they price images at very low price point, within $1 or a few dollars per image. Some of them have like Shutterstock, have the subscription model whereby you pay a monthly fee for a certain amount of downloads per day or per month or per year. So they're really volume-based solution. They're great for companies that need a lot of images, or small moms and pops companies that just need a cheap image to post on their family websites or their local
They also
company website.
pricing is based on the size of the image as well, too. No.
Well, that's very interesting. They used to be, and that has changed recently. Yes, the larger the file size, the more expensive the image. But now, since they realize that most of the usage is online and the file size doesn't matter, actually, 72 DPI is fine, and the smaller size work fine. They kind of all slowly abandoning that format, and it's one price for any size.
And then the large agencies, the Gettys of the world, how many of them are left actually?
Well, the
how do they
large,
differ?
Getty, obviously, Corbis. Then you have companies underneath like Alamy, which is an English-based company, which has a large amount of images, and then you have the microstocks like Shutterstock. But the large generalists, I think, unless I'm forgetting anybody, I would say Alamy and Corbis and Getty are the three that cover the broad range of commercial stock, news, photography, sports. And then, recently we see the emergence of startups like 500 Pixels or 2020 that are coming into the market and sort of disturbing what has been in place in the past. So it's evolving. It's changing rapidly. It's mostly changing because the technology in the photography space is changing very rapidly also. So the commercial stock and the stock photography market has somewhat evolved, adapted, struggled with the evolution of photography as we know it. And there's many great things to happen, I think.
You say great things. Define great.
I'm saying great because, as I said, it's very much linked to the evolution of technology, and a lot of what the stock agencies have done in the past was concentrate on print and not so much on online usage, and how we see photography evolving online. The fact that it's no longer limited to a flat two-dimensional image. It can be moving. You see Apple Live format coming out. You see 360 stills or video coming out, and VR and things like that. That allows for new models of licensing. What you're talking about is the old model of licensing is basically you rent a picture for a limited amount of time, although that amount of time is extended over the period of history. But
is it safe to say that stock imagery was more stable as a way of monetizing when it was just a print world? 'Cause it seems that once everybody went online, things started to get kind of funny.
Absolutely. It's been disturbed by the fact that the usage and the way people consume images have changed dramatically. Before, you would buy a magazine and only a limited life on the shelf. Now images stay online forever, even if it's deeper into the websites. But then again, they offer more a deeper experience. The challenge for commercial stock photography companies right now is redefining how you license an image, and this is where we're having some discrepancies. Some photographers are not getting any money out of it anymore. The companies are doing very well. You can see Shutterstock is valued at more than $1 billion. But in the meantime, it's a great period to experiment and to see new companies experiments with new models that at the end, some of them might end up making more money for photographers than the old model.
But fewer photographers? Because it seems to me there's also another problem is that we have there are so many more I think there's 8 times as many photographers in the past 10 years and gazillions of more pictures. So imagery is just out there that much more right now.
Well, the barrier for entry for photographers lowered down very, very quickly. Companies, the microstock companies, are accepting images from anybody. As long as you can take a picture, you can submit it to them, and if they like what you have, then they'll take it and license it. So there's there's more photographers, quote unquote. There's more part-time photographers that are submitting to these companies that are challenging the professional photographers that were doing this or are doing this full time. So in that sense, yes. I don't think there's more professional photographers. I think that amount has remained stable. So the competition is more coming from the fact that there's more, again, part-time photographers coming in and submitting to that market and competing with professional photographers.
Rana, you're coming from Getty Images, which is the 500-pound gorilla, and you've also now you're working with smaller agencies, but you've been in the big seat. What's your take on things? How do you see things changing, and do you like what you see?
I think basically things are changing, and not just for photography. I think things are changing all around the world. They're changing for the clients, the ad agencies. So whether I like it or not isn't exactly the question. I think for me, it's more the ability to adapt and move forward. I worked at small agencies starting out, so I've been on the ground. This is from Leo DeWeiss in 1980, whatever. And I've seen those agencies grow on their own and then grow through being aggregated in some of these larger agencies, so Getty and so forth. The agencies are responding to the marketplace. They're not necessarily changing the industry for the sake of changing the industry. They're really changing it as a result of need, what their clients are asking for. Clients are now being asked to get images, just massive amounts of images left and right. And these are different. So these are also different kinds of clients as well. Whereas we used to have these traditional clients, we had the advertising agencies, we had the magazines, we had the textbook publishers, we had these very sort of uniform clients.
Fewer, more defined.
Right. And so they were
outlets.
easier to provide solutions for. And I think now the agencies over the last 10 years, there's been this incredible velocity of just speed of having to provide new and volume of images. And that's for all the different websites, the different, people's internal publications, people, it's just email after email that you get has images. Everything has an image now. For me, I'm actually kind of excited by the fact that images are part of our global language at this point. So whether you're speaking English or whether there's a text, I can look at somebody's Facebook page and I can kind of understand what they're posting, whether I can read what the Russian that's under it. I'm getting a communication from somebody. So I think images, whether it's motion or still or VR or whatever it's going to be, is a language that we're now speaking. So
That's
I think
it's
different than what we were doing before, which was selling things. I think we're now communicating. So I'm excited about that.
I like that analogy of it. We're communicating rather than selling. But if you're a photographer and this is what you do for a living, what do you have to do to stay focused in the stock world if you want to be able to monetize that?
Well, for me, I'm a commercial photographer. A big part of my work is stock photography, but I do all types of photography.
It's a volume game. If you want to succeed in that space as a photographer, you have to produce a lot of images and continue and not stop. It wasn't always like that, but now it's just about volume. So you have to create a flow of production that's continually uploading your images to the companies you're working with. At the same time, you have to keep a very, very close eye on your budgets, on how much it costs you to produce those images. You have to be somewhat of an accountant and sort of calculate and look at your sales and see what is beneficial for you and what is not based on cost and sale. The good news about our current world is that you can look and get some market intelligence by looking at what's selling, what's on the sites, what other photographers are offering. So you can create your own offering based on what you see out there. Before, it used to be in drawers and libraries, so you could never see that. So now it's kind of an advantage. But I would say the number one priority, if you want to succeed in that space, is just to produce a lot of content and to keep on producing it. It's a lot of work. It's probably a lot of stress too, because it's not always rewarding. But you have to keep on the long term and just produce.
What about visual marketing platforms? You have agencies like Olapac, Curate, Shoot, where you have your picture there, and all of a sudden you have your little pop-ups coming up and little things of that sort. What are your thoughts about that?
I'm not sure. Olapac, you mean?
Yeah.
And Shoot, they're a competition to the commercial stock market, because they go and curate Instagram and places like that to find images from individuals that represent the products of companies they're working for, so that those companies can post those images on their blogs or website or e-commerce website.
I personally find that to be an amazing approach. I think that's really bright. But I wonder how it would work out.
For them, yes, but they don't pay any license fees or anything to the photographers or the people that took the pictures and posted them on Instagram.
Well, hold on. So if I take a picture and there's, say, a can of Coke in there, and an agency working with Coke is out there grazing, looking for images, and they find my picture and there's a can of Coke, and they want to have a little pop-up thing or a banner or something come up on my picture, I don't get paid for that?
Oh, wait. We're talking about two different things here. Olapic and Shoot are different. You're talking about in-image advertising where you have a pop-up on the image.
Yeah.
That's more companies like GumGum or SnapTag,
Okay.
or places like that. And to answer your question, no, you don't get anybody from that. They work in the same model that you see advertising on YouTube videos, basically, except that they don't. There's no revenue sharing with the photographer. The publisher gets revenue sharing from those companies, and obviously the companies that do the technology, but the photographers don't get anything out of it.
Raise your hand if you're happy about that. No hands. Okay. Very interesting environment we're in. That's all I can say.
Just to add, I think one of the things that you were talking about was to be very targeted about what you're shooting, what you're producing, and that just to go further with that is to really have a good relationship with your agent. And once you develop that, and some of the creative research that you're talking about, which is to get a sense of what's going on, that is written out for you by the agencies. They are producing that for photographers in beautiful, websites, and they have, they spend a lot of time and a lot of money trying to educate the photographers as to what's out there and what's selling and what will help them. So as long as the photographers are making money, the agencies will be making money, because they're not going to be able to get the content, and they're not actually doing the same kind of budgets and commissions that they were doing. The work for hire is not being done at this point at the level that they were. So they're really relying on photographers.
Let's say, for example, I'm a photographer and I have been shooting for 10 years and I have a backlog of images, things that I shot for an assignment that never got used, or even shots of my kids. What can I do with them? What would you do with them? Who would you approach? Is that a model to make any money, or is it kind of a waste of time?
It's a lot of time. Mm-hmm. I think it really also depends on the images and the subject. Mm-hmm. So your kids, I don't know that I would suggest doing the 3-month-long edit and then all this, like if it's film, you have to scan it. If it's, depending on how far back we're talking about, I think the agencies have their fill of backlogged images. I think as a photographer, the only thing you might add to it is a magical moment where it's just spectacular. So if it's at the level of, family of man photography, and it's something that, is special, I think that would make sense. I'm not sure that I wouldn't go through my own archive, mm-hmm. actually. And I have plenty that's there that hasn't been touched. Mm-hmm.
There's this myth that you can just submit your family photos to some place out there and get this constant stream of revenue coming in. And of course, there's also this myth of the as we were calling it yesterday, the lottery image, that one shot that may make you $50,000 because somebody needs it. And it just seems to be a myth.
Well, it's more like history. It's not a myth. It's factual. I mean, that cloud shot that would earn $100,000 every year is true. That did happen.
Oh, so it does happen. Okay, great.
Well, it did happen.
It did happen. Okay.
I think there are shots. Definitely, there is the money shot. I mean, there is that thing. It's definitely not as common as it used to be.
It's interesting. I think it still happens, but not the same way. Before, it used to be one license with one company. In the case, I think you're talking about the Microsoft picture.
No, this is from old catalog stuff where we would.
But the cloud picture, was it the background from?
I think that's probably more. God, I hope they got more than that.
In the past, it used to be one license, one image sold to one company that could bring you a lot of money. Now it's more of one image that will get used a lot by different companies for a lesser price point. So when you accumulate it, then it comes out to a substantial amount. You see that in microstock.
And that you used to see in stock, rights managed all the time. I mean, we used to track the sales of catalog shots, and it was definitely a cloud shot would make 100,000.
Either of you explain rights managed and royalty free, just to get a sense?
Yeah, sure. Rights managed is when a client wants to use an image and put some restrictions on it, both in time of how long they're going to use the image and also in what space they want to protect from other competing companies to use the same image. So that's why it's called rights managed, because you actually have to discuss with your client as a stock photo.
And of course, they pay more for that.
They pay more because they basically forbid the stock agency to license that image as much as they possibly could. So in exchange, they pay more for the rights to.
And will that translate to the photographer? Will the photographer
translate? Yes. Stock photo agencies work on a commission basis. So a photographer that submits images to those agencies get anywhere from 20% to 50% these days, I think. In a very, very rare cases, a little bit more, but that's the average. So every time an image is sold, then the stock agency splits that revenue with the photographer on those bases. Royalty-free is basically allows a client to use that image multiple times in different formats without having to justify. They basically pay once and multiple usage. In exchange, they cannot ask for the rights to be the only one to use that image. So there's a risk that their competition might use the same image, and there's no way to know because the stock photo agency is not responsible for informing them who else was using the image. So that's more of a volume based retribution for the photographer, because the same image could be used thousands or hundred thousands of times, while by a rights managed image might be used only 5 times or 10 times, but eventually
if it's the right image and the right account and the right company paying for it, it could be
right. And it's a difficult balance. But as Rana said, your relationship with your stock photo agency is really important, because they will help you create those images that will have a better chance to succeed in front of their clients. They know their clients very well. As a photographer, you know photography very well, and so if you have a great relationship, then there's a match that happens, and that magic happens sometimes.
Is it easy to maintain a relationship with an agency right now? Because again, there are so many people submitting pictures.
My experience is that it's very easy. I mean, we're all incredibly busy. They are very busy, but this is what they do. It's harder than it was. But if I reach out to a new agency, and even with Mother Image, which is it's a boutique agency, we have almost like a photographer agency relationship. So we get advice on where the images should be placed. So whether it's royalty-free or rights managed. Rights managed, traditionally, they select fewer images. And that is so that they can control the rights easier. So it's not just the individual shot that gets selected, it's the sisters, the similars along with it. So those will be limited as well. So volume-wise, what Paul is saying is that volume is part of the game and has always been and has just increased tremendously. You want to have more images selected. So as a photographer, you have to weigh what your production costs were and where you might want to place the images, and the agency will help you do that. I've not had a problem making new relationships with agencies. I think they're, for the most part, very open to it. I mean, they're looking for somebody who is, it's give and take. So they're looking for a partner, and collaborating is huge.
It depends on what type of agencies you're working with. Rhonda says it's very true to small and niche agencies where they take care more of the photographers. If you go on the other side, companies like Shutterstock or iStock or the microstock companies, they don't have a special care for photographers since they're volume-based, since they get images from people all over the world, and they try to limit their costs to the minimum. They don't have a particular one-on-one relationship with photographers. They issue some newsletters and things like that to help the masses of photographers that are submitting, but they don't seek out or help photographers. If they lose one, they don't even know if they lose photographers or not, actually, because they just get huge volume of images submitted. But in the case of Mother Image or other smaller stock photo agencies, it's the complete reverse. They have almost a family relationship with the photographers that they sometimes know for 10 years, 15 years, have dinner with. It's very close relationship. That's up to the photographer to decide what type of relationship they want. If they feel more comfortable, they should go with smaller niche photography, stock photography companies. If they prefer, not having any relationship besides receiving a payment every month, then they should go with, the Shutterstock or iStock, where they're basically on their own.
And I would just add to that as well, is that there's an element of understanding the needs of the agency and what you can provide and what you know as a photographer, that there's a learning curve. So as somebody coming into this new, I would say absolutely work with a smaller agency, and that they would be able to guide you through this. It's a professional industry. So coming into this, you have to understand everything from model releases to what your responsibilities are in terms of educating your models. You have to make sure that they understand that you are going to exploit their image commercially. And I literally say that to people so that it's very clear. There's no second guessing. So that will eliminate big problems later on. And those are legal issues and things like understanding copyright and understanding, property release and at what point do you need. These are all very fine and finessed things that we're both members of Digital Licensing Media Association. And that's formerly the PACA, Picture Agency Council of America. And so these are all the things that as a person providing imagery into the commercial space, you have to understand.
And this would apply for anyone working at, let's say, a boutique agency or a micro stock, right? I mean, the same goes if you just want to submit 100 photos to iStock Photo or something along those lines. You need to get your rights in order and cover your own self. That's not the job of the agency. It's your job.
Right. And some agencies require, that you are going to not hold them responsible for you are providing everything clean and clear. So there's liability issues and, not to scare anybody, but it's a commercial space. So the images are being used commercially on at times a big global scale. So the idea with Flickr and images have been, so the idea also with editorial type images, things that street photography, that kind of thing. all along, those images have been used, but there used to be agencies that would clear rights. So there was just somebody sitting in an office and figuring out who took that picture and how can they clear the rights. And so these are all things that the agencies are now doing also with their editorial work. So they're getting this increased base. So it's everything from the Flickr shot that somebody wants to use, a Getty client wants to use a Flickr shot. They will clear that image and they'll get all the rights. But in those cases are rare. If you have your work out there commercially, you're responsible for that.
If for somebody who's first getting into stock, say they've been taking pictures for a while or they have a large archive, does it matter if you have a particular niche that you're good at, or could you be just a good, what I call a shotgun photographer, where you could just walk down the avenue and just pull cherry images out of the sky and you have great stuff, but it's random? Does it make a difference, or is it really the quality of the work that would attract an agency?
I think you can succeed in both, with both backgrounds. Stock is a special beast in so much as, you're creating images for others or for companies to use it as a message for their brands or products. So whatever you're creating for stock has to have that dimension where it's just not a picture that you like or you think is pretty. It's something that has a meaning, an intent that will engage the people that are looking at it, and engage them in a way that is convenient for the brand using it. It's kind of a little different than just taking pictures for yourself or things that you like. You have to think that who is your client. In general, as a photographer, you have to think who is your client. And in stock, it's a little bit more complicated, so much as your client could be anybody or everybody. It could be the dentist, creating his new website, or it could be, as we talked about before, Coca-Cola deciding to want to do a campaign of something using an exciting image. So every time you take a picture and you're thinking about doing pictures for commercial stock, you have to think about this wide possibilities of usage that your image can have, and be also very careful in not including things that people cannot use in their images. One very common example is that obviously any photo with a logo in it will never be used in stock. First, because you don't have the rights, and then second, no other company is going to use an image with a different logo in it or things like that. So it's a different frame of mind that you have to keep. What I say to photographers when they want to enter stock or they're talking to me about this business is always the same. And I think it was true in the 80s or 90s. Stock should be your second occupation, whether it's the outtakes from a shoot that you took, whether it's ideas that you had for a shoot that eventually you produce yourself because it's actually good for stock. But it should not, I really don't think it should be your number one and only source of revenue as a photographer. And Rana could speak much better about this. I don't think it's as rewarding as working for a client directly. I don't think it's rewarding as an artistic, reward, and financially, I think it's probably not as rewarding as that. And there's so many other things that can be done. We're talking about technology and the way the market and photography is evolving. I see these companies that have Instagram accounts or Facebook accounts or Twitter accounts and Snapchat, and they have an extraordinary need for photography. They have to feed those social media channels that they have, and those are getting more and more important for them. And they don't have anybody on staff to do that. And sure, they can buy and license some images from Shutterstock and Getty here and there, but it doesn't show their own company culture. And many times I've said to photographers, why don't you rent yourself as a photographer to one of these companies and take over their Instagram account for a month or for 2 months and say, let me hang out in your factories and with my iPhone and take pictures of what you guys do, but using my talent as a photographer, and we can post that on your Instagram account or things like that. I see that as a huge market and challenging, but very interesting for photographers.
Could you do me? Don't tell anybody about this because I want to check this out personally before the word gets out.
But coming back to stock, I think it should be. It's a great second income, I think, especially if you have the time, because again, as Rhonda said, and I second that, it takes a lot of time to edit, to make sure you have all the paperwork, to get some understanding of the market and what people are using and things like that. I think it's you're better off as a second occupation.
You were asking about specializing. I'm a jack of all trades and master of whatever I'm doing that day is basically how I look at it. Stock definitely is a part of my income. It's a big part of my income. It's a big part of my thought process, but it's actually not what I do every day. I am a commercial photographer responding to clients and jobs and assignments. And so that's where my day.
But you wear two hats, right? Because you shoot, and I guess some of your outtakes or some of the things you may happen to catch, you sell as stock, but you also have an agency where you're hiring, or not hiring, but you're using the work of other photographers, correct?
So I am the primary photographer for Mother Image, as well as we do have additional really great photographers that sort of are broadening the scope, but it started out with a very small base. So we're now expanding. So we're bringing in photographers with different visions. It all works within our base, which is really focused on what I left Getty and to spend time with my family. So my focus was to shoot what I love. And that's what I used to tell photographers day in, day out, shoot what you love. And so my focus was my family. So that's where both Susan and I, that's where our focus was. And so we started Mother Image, where one of the things that we had heard as both of us working at Getty was that clients are looking for authentic images. So we decided here we are. It's sitting in authenticity right here. So started literally shooting what was in my backseat of the car and my kids strapped in.
I think that's something that we see as a major change in terms of the images we see now. In your case is a good example. We're seeing these kind of authentic shots.
And the thing is that authentic still, I still produce it. So it's not literally carrying the camera around and snapping my kids. It's actually producing, it's thinking through the concept. So what Paul was saying about the images having a message. So it's not necessarily the image and it's not the subject particularly that's going to make it sell or not. It's what the message is, what the image is communicating. So we're kind of back to that. I mean, it really has to communicate something. So whether it's a concept, it could be a business concept, but you're actually shooting two kids, sitting there brainstorming and they're drawing pictures of clouds and whatever. So you can make that into a business brainstorming concept. So that's what Mother Image is focused on doing.
Would you say that your model or the model of Mother Images is something that another photographer should follow, in the sense that embrace what they're doing, what they love, what they have around them, turn it into an agency, and then get those photos out there?
Or it doesn't have to be an agency. It can be a production. So agency is not an agency involves
maybe that's not the right word,
additional overhead and requirements.
Do you think it's possible then for somebody to kind of make a go at it, just in this sense, just kind of putting out the images that they like to create, even if they just, let's say, hang a shingle, open up, start a website? There
are so many different business models now, and I don't know if Paul can speak to that better, but there are non-royalty-free, non-exclusive royalty-free. So yes, you can hang your shingle out there, but again, it's volume and who's going to see the image. So whether you hang your shingle out there, can you actually get the clients to see your image? So somebody
it's about marketing also, obviously. Yeah. You can't just say, here I am, because who are you talking to?
Exactly. So the bigger agencies are making that accessible. They're looking for high production. They'll provide the marketing, but they're also opening up the business models so you don't have to be exclusive. So you can actually sell your own images at the same time as they're licensing them. So there are a lot more options now than there were.
This is a question I had from prior in the conversation, but is it possible to predict a budget or what you might bring in each year? Because you were talking, obviously, as a photographer, you need to understand these things. But can you really predict, at least with your size of your agency, what you expect to make each year and how these images will do? Or is it just kind of hope for the best?
It's definitely changed. I'd say the last 10 years, it's a different number that we're looking at, a different equation that you're looking at. So, but the coming up with the equation is the same. So you're looking at your sales, you're looking at your volume of images and where they're placed. And, you can do everything from detailed spreadsheets to now, you can download your sales, your monthly royalty statements, and you can actually, plug them into an Excel spreadsheet, and you can do a year-by-year analysis, or you can do a, time. You can do all sorts of things, and I would definitely recommend that. It used to be that the shelf life of an image was far longer, so anywhere from 10 to 15 years. At this point, I'm still selling images at a certain small agency, which I won't mention, but I'm still selling images. So they're still there. I haven't submitted in over 10 years to this agency, and I'm still receiving royalties.
And as a photographer, would you recommend spreading yourself out amongst different agencies?
It depends on your volume. Mm-hmm. It really depends on how much you're going to produce, because as Paul is saying, volume, I think it's volume and your relationship at the same time. So it's volume and what you're shooting and the subject. But it depends. I'm spread out. That's how I like to be. I like to know that, if that's not working, that's working.
Yeah, no, that's a good strategy.
And that I think has helped me survive.
Yeah, I think to answer your question, it depends on multiple factors. First, I think is your personality. If you want to deal with multiple stock agencies or not, if you have the time also, because it's different royalties, it's different people to talk to. I think it also depends on what type of content you create. And then third, there's always this ongoing debate between photographers. Some are very, very happy by being an exclusive with an agency. Usually what you gain from that is that you get a higher royalty rate for being exclusive with that agency. Getty and Corbett and others have these special programs where if you do not submit to anybody else, you get 10% royalty more or something like that. So some people are very comfortable with that. Others are like, well, I make more money by spreading it out to as many agencies as I can. So it's, it varies.
Depends on your mindset, I guess.
Yeah. And then again, I think to me, it would be more a question of time, because you have to manage all these relationships and make sure you know where you sent what images to whom and if they paid you and, things like that. But some photographers are very comfortable at doing that.
My impression is that, and I'm sure it's not just mine alone, is that rates have gone down. A lot of photography is absolutely free. What can you do if you are a photographer and you are doing this or you want to start doing this? What kind of photographs would you be taking that would perhaps be a little bit more bulletproof from being just given away?
That's not an easy one. There's no magic bullet. No. I can't tell you, if you take a picture of this and looking like that with that type of light, you're gonna make a fortune. But there's some parameters that you can keep in mind. For one thing, I think the most obvious one is create exclusive content. That means that nobody else can have the same image. Whether it means that you're in a location that nobody else can reach, whether your model situation, you see that, for example, very much in to use an example, extreme sports, for example, where you have these incredible images that is hard for any other photographer to replicate. One element that we haven't really touched upon, a lot of the stock photography that you see is partly or heavily retouched with Photoshop, and sometimes elements are being included in post-processing. I'm not saying that about your pictures, obviously, but you see that a lot on a microstock space also. So there are some photographers that are extremely good at creating concept images by using elements of 2 or 3 photos that they take themselves. They don't steal it from anywhere else, and recreating a conceptual image that actually has a lot of value. So that's another way to be exclusive.
With so many more photographers out there right now, is it harder to get into an agency like Corbis and Getty?
They're still looking for photographers. They're absolutely looking for photographers, but I think they're looking for photographers that are educated in what needs to be done and that are coming with a vision and a knowledge base.
Past 10 years have been pretty crazy as far as how it's changed. What do you feel about the next 10 years?
Like we touched upon at the beginning, I think what we're going to see is a widening of the type of format that we call photography. It's no longer going to be the simple flat 2D image, partly moving with depth. We see it with VR and upcoming this year and things like that. So photography is as an object, if I can name it like that, is going to evolve. And behind it, or along with it, the way people license or pay to use those images, whether it's on assignment for hiring photographers or on a stock aspect of it. We see Getty last year just released a lot of their images, I think 35 million, where people can use it for free by just using an embed code. The idea behind that is not for Getty to just give their collection for free. What they're doing is enabling to spread out their content on multiple websites so that they can gather traffic, and against that they can start selling ads. The pop-up ads we were talking about earlier. So instead of licensing those images directly to the publishers, they give those images for free, and down the line they'll be adding some advertising on those images, and Getty will make revenue not on the licensing fee but on the advertising and the traffic that it generates. So there's much more money to be made on with that type of model than there is with the traditional licensing, especially the online licensing where you're talking about a few dollars per usage. We're going to see that evolve and grow, and that's going to be, especially if Getty succeeds in implementing that, you're going to see a lot of other stock photo agencies running behind and replicating that model. Yahoo had announced last year that they're going to open Flickr to commercial sales, and this is a commercial stock photo agency also. And we're going to see more of entry in the markets like that from pictures taken by everybody, entering the stock photo market and being available for anybody to license.
Any thoughts?
One of the things for me is people wanting their own brand images. That's where I'm focused on. So while I shoot stock, I also do a lot of work with, as you were saying a little bit, with agencies who want their own company covered in the same way that I would a stock shoot. So I've already been doing that a lot. So I think branding, clients are moving both towards and away from stock. I think that there's a lot of room for a lot of photographers.
Is the word stock photo even valid anymore?
I think it's going to remain. Not everybody has the means or the needs to hire a photographer for a shoot. And there's a few companies that are doing what is called stock on demand, where as a brand, you can just type in what type of images you need on your phone or your desktop, and that message is broadcasted to thousands of photographers worldwide. And either they can look into their own private library of images, or they can, if they want to, go out and shoot it and then submit it back to the client, and then the client decides which one they like and pay for that one and not the others. So that could be something that changes the market. Instead of having these massive, $50 million images, databases, which are expensive to maintain, and you instead have 50 million photographers waiting or accessible via their phones.
Waiting by their phones. Yeah.
And they actually keep on handling their private collection on their desktops and things, and just submitting when there's a need. That evolution might happen. Right now we're just at the beginning of that, so it's unclear whether it's going to succeed or not. But that would be a different format, yes.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Rana. Thank you, John Harris, our producer, and Jason Tables, our engineer. To see more of Rana's work, go to ranafaure.com. That's RANAFAURE.com. To learn more about what Paul is doing, go to melchersystem.com. Give us your opinions on Twitter at BHPhotoVideo with the hashtag BHPhotoPodcast. And please leave a review for us on iTunes. It's much appreciated. My name is Alan Weitz. Thank you for joining us today.